Why is it so hard to buy a Rolex? Like, what is it? What is the game? I became obsessed with this question. And around 2 years ago, when I first walked into a boutique to buy a date just with a green dial, the one that I'm wearing now, before my son was born, I was kind of buying it as like a celebratory milestone moment of, I had a little bit of money in the bank and it wasn't really doing anything. So I thought, I'll buy myself a watch. I've never really had like a really nice watch before, so I thought I'd treat myself. The reality is that when you actually go into the AD, at least for me, you feel like you're being judged from the second you walk in. And I think that's strategic, because they're trying to kind of figure you out, right? And here's my experience. The first time I went into an AD, I was by myself. I had a backpack on actually because I just went to the gym. And I basically asked her, do you have any green dial dates just available? That was the watch that I wanted. I didn't want any other color. I was not going to be, swanging to a different model. I wanted the green dial date just, right? And she kind of looked at me. And I think because I live in Thailand and because there's a lot of people kind of coming in and out of Thailand, I think she thought I was a tourist. But I've actually lived here for like a couple of years now. So I didn't really get the warmest welcome. But the second time I went in there, the welcome was a lot warmer, I think because I went with my wife. So she realized that I was married to, a Thai woman, and she obviously realized, okay, maybe I can make some dough from this guy. Maybe I can make some commission from this guy and sell him some watches. Now, with that particular experience, and I actually have messages. I'm not sure if I can show you the person specifically. Not sure if you can see any of this or if any of this is even in focus, but I have messages from Rolex salesperson, should I say, where she basically blatantly says that you need to have a purchase history and a relationship with the actual AD before we can sell you a Rolex, because we don't know if you're going to resell it to someone in the grey market or whatever. We need to know that you're trustworthy to actually have the Rolex from us, because they could get in trouble if Rolex finds out if I resell it, right? She was very, very clear that in order to be considered as a customer of hers for a Rolex date just, which could just magically appear if I happened to create a purchase history with them, I would have to buy another watch from them. They also sell Hublot and some other brands which are, incredibly inflated in regards to price, and the quality isn't great. Therefore, their profit margin is going to be larger. Therefore, their commission is going to be bigger. They want to make a little bit of dough from you before they actually sell you the thing that you actually want. That's basically the game. Now, the reality is that you can just go to the grey market. That's actually how I got this watch. I actually went to the grey market, paid a little bit more, and ultimately got the watch for less than I would have paid if I actually bought a Hublot watch or something else that I wouldn't have even wanted or needed from that boutique. So the question really is, do they actually have enough watches to supply demand? And I think that they do. And here's my little experience that I had. The first time I went into the Rolex boutique, she said, oh, we don't have anything available. All of this is exhibition only. Obviously, I was just there with a backpack. She thought I was a tourist. So I can understand why she would say that, right? She wasn't really expecting to have me as a customer. The second time when I went with my wife, she had the exact model that I wanted, but it wasn't in the shop window. It was in the back room. She sent a guy into the back room to get the watch. I'm just speculating here, and I'm not sure if this is true, but I'm pretty sure they've got pretty much every single model in that back room. And they only show it to specific people who they think they can create a relationship with, or they can sell more product to, which is fine. That is a perfect business model, right? If you can pull it off. The tricky part is when a customer gets annoyed because they know that you're playing a game, right? They know that you're treating them like an idiot, right? If you think I'm an idiot, then, I'm not really going to look at you very fondly, right? And I understand that Rolex is not employing this person. They are an employee of the boutique who then represents Rolex. But in my eyes, when I'm walking into a Rolex boutique, that person represents Rolex. So I instantly associate them with Rolex, right? And ultimately, these guys are just taking advantage of the #1 rule in business: supply and demand, and profiting massively from it. It's economics 101, right? They are literally taking the golden rule of business and using it to make the maximum amount of profit and to create this scarcity and this aura around the Rolex product, which then boosts up the price when it comes to the grey market, which is, not good for anyone. Especially in COVID, that shit was crazy. And at first, I literally thought this was the only thing that was making it super hard to buy a Rolex. They were holding pieces back in order to create this scarcity. But then, after a while of looking into things and, researching other people's experiences and just trying to kind of figure out what was really going on behind the scenes, I realized that there's a little bit of that going on, 100%. But I also think that it just comes down to the fact that there is maybe a shortage in the amount of people ready to work for Rolex to actually make the watches that are needed. I think it's reported that Rolex makes like just over 1 million watches a year. And there's a lot of work that goes into making a Rolex, don't get me wrong. There's different models with different levels of complexity. Some are simpler than others, some are a little bit more complicated, obviously, but at the bare bones of it, people need to invest time into making that timepiece, into polishing it the right way, into making the movement, into crafting everything handmade in Switzerland. And I know from a manufacturing standpoint of developing the Evermont that, it takes 90 to 100 days to actually develop even a simple watch, right? Which isn't selling for, over $1,000, for example. If you're making a watch that is, $10,000, $20,000, you're using really precious materials like white gold, rose gold, it is going to cost so much more. It's going to take so much time. You need to be so careful with wastage, with getting things right, perfectly aligned. The margins of error are so much more narrow. Even though watches that are under $1,000 can have extremely great quality control and can be smashing watches, if you're buying a $10,000 watch, you want everything to be right and perfect. And the standard in regards to manufacturing does naturally just become higher because obviously the expectation is higher from the customer. So I do think that comes into play as well. I don't think it's just the AD that's creating this fake scarcity. It's definitely part of it, 100%. But I do think that there's kind of this friction or harmony, whatever you want to call it, between the game that the ADs play, but also the fact that Rolex can only make a certain amount of watches per year. And also think about the fact that it's probably difficult to get watchmakers like these. It's not the sexiest hobby. Who wants to be sat at a desk all day wearing a little, magnifying glass and piecing things together? It looks sexy in the adverts, but how many people actually want that job? How many people want to train for 6 months to a year just to learn how to do one single little tiny thing perfectly for the likes of Rolex? Maybe for a very small fraction of people, that's going to be like the perfect job, doing one single thing every single day. But for most people, that's going to be quite monotonous, right? It's going to be quite a repetitive task. It's kind of like working in a factory, just in a more refined setting. And I mean, you are kind of working in a factory, so it kind of makes sense, but you get the idea, right? It's not the most glamorous job, even though you can see I'm working at Rolex, but it's not a job that you're going to jump out of bed for every single day. At least I wouldn't anyway. So I think it's kind of a mixture of everything. I think it's this perfect storm of profitability where you can literally have a product which is beautifully designed, very much desired, advertising is spot on, brand messaging is spot on. It's been, the brand's been around for a very long time. They've built this perception of being this, this incredible watchmaker with this highly desirable product. And now it just comes down to the fact that the actual manufacturer is struggling to serve every single one of the ADs. So the ADs have the piece that you want. They have the watch that you want right now in the back room, or even in the window, but it's exhibition only and it doesn't actually have a movement inside, which is baloney in my humble opinion. They're only going to sell the watches to the people who they know are going to bring more business, okay? And maybe that's grey market dealers, maybe, okay? And maybe it is someone who has bought $10,000 or $5,000 worth of jewelry, which has a higher profit margin. They are playing the game perfectly. But I also think that they are playing that game because they have a very select and small number of pieces which they can sell and use to their advantage, which is why I think when I went to Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago for the Hong Kong Watch Fair, I managed to get offered 4 Rolexes in one single visit. A Submariner, a Skydweller, a Datejust, and also, what was the other one? Something else, I can't remember. I think it was a President. But I mean, the result of this is people are starting to take their money elsewhere, right? There are plenty of other great brands out there. When it comes to watchmaking and the actual quality of the watches and the level of detail, the craftsmanship, the story behind the watches, to be honest, Rolex has the biggest advertising budget, they're the most profitable. And yeah, Rolex has kind of hit this perfect storm and they've been riding it for, you know, God knows how long, where, you know, you have that limited manufacturing capability and also the, you know, the ADs playing their game. I think there are better watches out there and people are starting to take their money elsewhere and starting to get sick of this whole Rolex game. I honestly think that Rolex as well, because of this, because more people are going to these other brands like, you know, Vacheron Constantin and, you know, Jaeger-LeCoultre and all these other brands out there, they are starting to show on the likes of social media that there are cooler brands out there with better stories, with just as nice finishing, with, you know, cool aesthetics, and you know the watches maybe fit a little bit better. They are showing the world that there is other options apart from Rolex. And although Rolex is always going to be there, it's always going to be an option, it's always going to be desirable, I do think that the likes of social media is showing others who are not as educated in regards to watches and the world of watches, they're showing that there are other options out there, and you don't have to have a Rolex to be cool. You can wear another watch. Like I remember trying on the rose gold green dialed overseas, and it was incredible. Like it made me feel like a god for like the 30 seconds that I had it on my wrist. It was awesome. And if I had 50 grand just to throw away, I would probably buy it. The reality is my wife would kill me. So I stuck to something a little bit more conservative, to say the least. But ultimately, you know, there are other brands out there, and I think that more people are getting tired of this whole waitlist game, and they're starting to say, listen, like, you know, you're not that special, bro. Like, you are desirable, I like it, but I'm gonna go elsewhere. But maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you've had a different experience in regards to Rolex, which, you know, I'm sure, you know, some people have got super lucky and walked into a Rolex store and literally got the exact watch that they wanted, which, if you have, which boutique did you go to and how did you do it, right? Let me know. Yeah, but hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.